Welcome and thank you for joining us for the online launch of Caitríona Lally's second novel, Wunderland, published by New Island. We're here on a beautiful autumn day in Books Upstairs, where you can get your signed copies in store or from your preferred bookshop or online retailer. My name is Aoife Walsh. I'm the commissioning editor with New Island Books, who published her book this autumn. And we're delighted to bring you this exclusive conversation between Caitríona Lally and Barry McCrea. Thank you very much to our funders, Arts Council, and our partners for this event, Books Upstairs.
Well, hi Caitríona, it's lovely to be here in Books Upstairs.
Hey Barry, great to be here.
Dublin's great bookshops with one of Dublin's great writers. So I just finished reading the book, and when Eggshells came out, your last novel, it was so original and so different. And now reading Wonderland after 2 sentences, I know I'm in a Caitríona Lally novel. But it's like, you know, the Pepsi challenge would always work with that. You know, instantly you've now developed what seems to me a really, really recognizable style and vision. And it's very different from Eggshells, but there's lots of things that are similar. So I'd like to know something about how you arrived at this book. It's quite different and quite similar to Eggshells, and maybe you can say something about how you came to this.
So yeah, I had just finished Eggshells when I started Wonderland, and I really wanted the brother-sister relationship. I wanted 2 characters. Eggshells was one kind of intense character, and I wanted to kind of divide up the voice and see if I could manage to do 2 completely different voices at the same time. So I think Roy probably is more of a continuation of Vivian from Eggshells. Like, he has that kind of slightly odd, eccentric streak. And then Gert, his sister, is, I think, more pragmatic. She's more grounded and earthy, and I wanted the kind of the foil, the contrast between the 2. And I think there's probably a lot of wordplay that continues from Eggshells into Wonderland, but like, that's not deliberate. That's just how I write. And I mean, it's probably a recognizable style, but that could be a danger too. If you get typecast or, you know, stuck in a certain way of writing, I probably would find it hard to write without that.
To me, it feels like that the kind of the style you start with in Eggshells has been kind of exploded open into this even bigger and more exciting world. But it is a very simple plot. So yeah, and spoilers are possible for this novel, so we'll avoid spoilers. But the basic plot is there is a man working, an Irishman working as a cleaner in Germany, and his sister comes to visit him. That's the basic plot. So how did you arrive at that scenario?
So that was, I wanted to take them away from Ireland for a kind of intensity of a sibling relationship. I wanted to put together 2 adult siblings who hadn't spent time together as adults, and they're kind of forced together, and it's bad weather in Hamburg and there's not much going on tourist-wise, so they're kind of thrust together. I wanted, like, I think originally I thought I had 3 days, but then in the editing process it turned out there were 6 days, which I hadn't counted very well. What was the rest of the question?
No, that was it. So they're plunged into each other's lives again after this time. But one of the things that happens to the reader is that we are also kind of just thrust into their world without any warning. And we have to try and figure out, because both of them are, it's a strange and complicated world with a lot of sometimes dark histories behind it. And we, the reader, we're kind of plunged into it, and we have to pick our way through it. And, you know, I was thinking about that experience and then thinking about the title. First of all, you think, Alice in Wonderland. So some people plunged into a very strange world, like Alice is, when she has to figure out its rules. And that's a bit what happens to us, the reader. But then for any Dubliner, we think of Wonderland. The kind of, obviously there's a real Dublin resonance to that. And then you realize that it's German, it's Wunderland, so land of wonders. Do you want to maybe talk about the title or unpack that?
Yeah, so it was pretty lazy, really. That was my working title from the start, because it was set in this miniature Wonderland in Hamburg, this model railway exhibition. And I just had, I was calling it Wonderland, but presumably it is technically Wunderland. That was my working title, and I just didn't, to be honest, get around to changing it. But I did like that idea of this whole other world where reality is a bit skewed. Things are not as they seem. There's a lot of secrets, and you don't really know at some points what's reality and what's fiction. And I like that idea of kind of this parallel universe, and you're kind of, you're going down the rabbit hole, and who do you believe, what's real?
Do you maybe want to describe the setup for people? What actually is the
Miniature Wonderland? Yeah. So it's a model railway exhibition in Hamburg, and I think it's around 250,000 miniature figurines and over 8 miles of railway tracks with constant little trains running around. And the lights dim in this exhibition every 15 minutes. So when the room's lights go dark, you can see the trains all lit up, and there's more magic kind of comes to life. And they're bizarre little scenarios. So like the scenarios I've described, the little situations like the festivals or the carnivals, they're all real in this exhibition. And the more you go to it, the more you find these bizarre little things, like, couples having sex. It looks like a children's little thing, but
Randy
then suddenly
monks,
there's Randy monks perving on the couples having sex, and they're real. Like, I think some people thought I'd invented them, but no, they're there in this.
So maybe just say how you arrived at that. This is very unusual.
It was random. So I had my brother-sister relationship back in 2014, and I went to visit a friend living in Hamburg when I just finished writing Eggshells, and then went to visit this model railway exhibition because I love miniature stuff myself. I'm fascinated by it, and just fell in love with the setting. I just thought this is a perfect setting for a novel. So I didn't even think about Hamburg or a different country, but when I found this place, I thought, okay, there's an intensity to it. And Roy, initially I had him as a security guard, but then he was doing too much standing and watching, and I wanted him to physically engage with his surroundings. And start messing with the exhibition. And that's when I made him a cleaner. And because I work as a cleaner too, it was easy to research what they do.
So I have to ask you about that, because your day job is a cleaner in Trinity.
Yeah.
And you must be, so one of the places that you work in, I think, is the museum building. Is that right? So, so there's some part of your day job has leaked into the world of this novel.
Yeah.
Do you want to say?
Yeah, I'd say especially feelings maybe. And I had to, I think, temper them a bit, like say certain angry feelings maybe about being unappreciated, or like at one point I had Roy make a load of angry signs telling people not to overfill the bin bags and things that was personal issues coming out, but I pulled back on them a bit. But things like, say, the mop bucket that we were talking about earlier, like, if I'm cleaning now and mopping, and I'm kind of thinking, wow, the mop bucket is just perfect. It's just built perfectly for its function, and it just works beautifully, unlike the Hoover, which that arm of the Hoover never stays up, ever. So that makes me angry every day. And
so that's why because it's not just the kind of the fact that he's a cleaner, there's also, you feel throughout the novel that the perspective of the cleaner really enriches the vision we get. That cleaners see something of the world that people who aren't doing that kind of work don't see. That the spaces feel different, and they see a whole different dimension to reality in a way. That there's a lot of scenes of about empty rooms, for example, or rooms where the people have left, and this character Roy, he's confronted with this exhibition when it's not being watched, when it's not being observed. And there's something about the special eye of the cleaner, what cleaners see. Is that something that you've got from your own work?
It does interest me, like seeing, like you said, the museum building in Trinity, or the Long Room Library, or the Book of Kells room. Like, these are rooms you get to see on your own when it's dark and there's nobody else around. It's kind of magical. And your imagination does run riot at those times. And it's the perspective of, someone he's on his own in the room sometimes, but then there's other shifts he works with people, visitors around him. But even then they don't see him. And I kind of like that thing, that invisibility of the cleaner, that people don't notice the cleaner, which is great. Like for him, he starts attacking and destroying some of the figurines, and people just don't seem to see it. So.
I mean, reading this book is a very intense emotional experience, even more than Eggshells, which is already very intense, because there's a mixture of, it's really funny. There's things you really laugh out loud at, and there's a great joy in very small, absurd details of the world and observation. And then there's enormous depths of grief and frustration and fear and loss in it, and you kind of go up and down. And one of the flips in perspective, I think, is that so a model railway exhibition is kind of a bird's eye view of the world. You're looking from way up high, and everybody is small. But actually, the other perspective we keep getting with it is the very on the ground perspective of a cleaner, that right in the middle of things and looking up. And I think that perspective is combined in lots of different ways throughout the book, including in the character of Gert, who's a carer. And she's, well, do you want to say a bit about her, maybe?
So she comes over and she's kind of drawn into Roy's world, and she goes to visit the miniature exhibition, but she doesn't really get it like he does. It frustrates her. But then she starts looking, I think, at everything as being miniature, or trying to figure out if something is real or miniature. She gets caught up in it. But she's now, because she's away for so many days without her kids and her husband for the first time, she's drawn back into memories of her marriage and her difficulties and her husband that suffers from depression. And she hasn't had the time or the space, I think, to think about this until now. And then suddenly she finds herself on her own. Roy hasn't taken days off to be with her all the time. And there's things are closed that she wants to see. She's kind of stuck, and she just gets back into her head. And I don't think she particularly wants to be there. She's managed to kind of spend the last few years just being practical and getting on with things. And now she has to start and think. So she's kind of going backwards in her head. She keeps trying to draw herself back to the present and say, I'm on holidays, I should be doing something. But she just drifts. She kind of gives in to the drift at some point of the memories.
And she's gone there to try and connect with the brother.
With the brother, yeah. They have a fraught enough relationship, and she was responsible for getting him to move to Hamburg. She decided that things weren't going great back in Ireland, and the best thing was to get him out. And she sees now things aren't amazing in Hamburg for him either, that he seems to be not connected so much to reality. So she's wondering if she made the right decision. So she's kind of being pulled from this fraught relationship at home with the husband to this difficult relationship with the brother, and wondering where she fits in all of this. Is she responsible for anything?
Yeah.
Has she done too much? Is she over-caring?
So that's what I meant earlier about the kind of flip perspective between the bird's eye view and the what they call the worm's eye view up on the top. And that it's almost like, because she's in this caring role, her husband has a lot of problems she's to look after. She's also a mother. There's some references to her parents, and then she's this problematic brother. And it's almost like she has to try and manage the world around her like it was a miniature railway exhibition, and not damage any of the figurines, but she's managing that too. That she's almost like, a kind of a cleaner for the miniature railway of all the people's lives around her.
Wow, I never thought of it like that. And she's doing the opposite probably, because she's trying to keep it all perfect, and Roy is trying to destroy it. So. And
she's wondering if she's in it, or is she just looking after it?
Yeah, exactly. But I wanted people to question her motives, or her kind of, she's no martyr either. She's not, did she do things for the right reasons? Is she behaving, I don't know, not adequately, but is she taking on too much, as some women tend to do, just...
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So she's a kind of a squeezed character with a lot of demands on her. Don't tell us about where she came from, or what you're thinking of with that.
I think, again, with the job, like, I worked as a carer myself. I've either worked as a carer or a cleaner, mostly kind of physical work. And I just like this sense of kind of alienation of that. So she has a few rants about women's magazines in the novel, and that would come from my perspective too. There's often this assumption that everyone works in an office, and there's always these things in fashion about this will take you from desk to dinner, from office to pub. And you're going, not everyone works in an office. I like this idea of, like Roy, this kind of alienation. I think it became increased in the pandemic, and then they kept talking about working from home as if everybody could work from home. With her, like, I don't have, my parents aren't elderly yet. I wrote this book initially when I didn't have kids. So it's not from experience of this kind of squeezed, I was imagining someone who was at a different stage of, being squeezed on both sides, I think, or, well, 4 sides, I think she's being squeezed on. I wanted to increase the pressure on her, I suppose, and see, and I like that she could kind of keep her good humour. Like, she veers between maybe over-analysing to then trying to forget it and just get on with things, and who knows what's the right way to go about these things.
I mean, that's one of the really original things about it, that we get... there are many novels about people leading middle-class lives and working in universities, or then here we really have the world as viewed from the perspective of people doing the kinds of jobs that we don't see represented. And it's not just drudgery, but we see the kind of whole imaginative complexity of those lives and the way the world works from there. And is that something you've got from your own work, or is it also just a leap of imagination?
Yeah, it's probably a leap of imagination too, just to, like I said, to kind of increase the alienation of, feeling like they don't fit into this wider world, or, and financially too, like that's a huge part of Gert's worries, is she doesn't have private health insurance, and the things that she hears about from other people she doesn't have, that she knows her husband would have got better help, better healthcare if he had health insurance, or this assumption I think that some people have money about. She does something which I did, like say one day I picked up a Saturday supplement in a newspaper, and they had a section on skirts that are hot right now, and I just kind of added them all up, the prices, and divided by the number of skirts there were, and the average was about, or median, whatever, it was about 300 something euros. It's like, how can the normal person afford that? So that idea that I often feel this complete alienation between you're reading what's in right now, and there'll be something that's described as cheap and cheerful, and you're going, what? Like, that's way beyond my budget. So I put the financial stuff in. That was important to me. That kind of, I don't know, I don't see it spoken about much, or there's an assumption that we all have a certain level of income.
Yeah, that really comes across in the book, and you don't lay it on, like, you don't make heavy weather out of it. It's just that this is the perspective we're in of people who are short of money, doing tiring, alienating jobs, but they're not completely defined by that. It obviously affects their life in all sorts of ways, but we also have then their big, rich, imaginative worlds. And there's this, I just noticed that you keep using the word fit, and I think there's a lot in this novel about things that fit or don't fit, and people who fit or don't fit. And so we have the kind of miraculous object of the mop bucket with which is perfectly described. I can't remember how you say it now, but the bit where you squeeze the mop and then the lip, and it's this kind of almost miraculous image of a thing that was really fit for its job, and then a series of things that don't fit, including maybe the characters themselves.
Yeah, I like that idea of not fitting in, and I suppose Gert wondering, where does she belong? Like, I think Roy doesn't have the internal thought process that she has. Like, I put him as a third person character because he's not too internal. He doesn't reflect that much. Gert is aware of the fact that she hasn't kind of got life right. She hasn't fit in, and she keeps wondering, if I had done this, if I had done that. And I think a lot of us do that at some point. God, if I did this in college, could this have happened for me? Could this have... but because she's in this very reflective mode, she goes very into her mind and thinking she doesn't fit in, and she feels even with her group of friends at home she doesn't fit in. She doesn't go along with what the group thinks, and I suppose sometimes I think she's going to crack, like thinking, is everyone lying? Is there an Emperor's New Clothes thing going on? Am I the only one thinking like this?
So one of the things, speaking about people fitting or not fitting or being misfits or trying to fit, so we have both of these characters, Roy and Gert, who feel that they're imperfect or not, or awkward, don't fit in the world properly in some way, but are surrounded by images of perfect worlds, the miniature railway, but also women's magazines and all of these. And there's kind of attempts to fit or to make things line up that people will recognize it, I think, from Eggshells. So there's similar, and often they're very funny. When she's visiting Hamburg and she's kind of down in the dumps, she sees that there's a stop on the U-Bahn called Schlump, and she decides she needs to go to Schlump because it'll kind of match how she feels. Or she decides she lashes into the whiskey because she feels she should be hungover because it would match, her mental state. That seems to be a theme in your writing a lot, doesn't it? People coming up with these kind of strange strategies to try and fit in that actually make them odder.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about it until you said it. But I suppose all of them have a desperate attempt to kind of find meaning or in some way solve their problems. But they don't go about it in the healthiest of ways. The getting drunk thing I liked because I felt Gert was she was building up like a pressure cooker. Like she was trying to do so many things that didn't work. And the schlumpf thing, I did that in Hamburg when I was visiting my friend. I just saw that stop on the U-Bahn and wanted to go. And like Gert, I couldn't get there. It was, that stop was being fixed that day and you had to get a bus, and I didn't bother. So I kind of had some of those experiences because I visited Hamburg in winter as well. I wanted to take a port tour. Gert did as well, and it wasn't running in winter. And I just love this idea of constantly trying. The getting drunk thing, then it's successful. She does feel awful, so it does match her mood.
Yeah.
Roy, I'm not sure how aware he is. Like, he knows he's acting, like, so he's trying to create his own little miniature world at home. I don't think he's aware that he's trying to fit in. I'm not sure how connected he is. He knows he has to do something. He has to destroy a perfect world. Maybe that's more his attempt.
So it'll match up with his own internal world,
not fitting in.
Yeah, where people are damaged and like himself.
Exactly. And then the lists, like to try and find meaning, the kind of lists of things he makes, or like looking at the train timetables book. He doesn't want to go on a train, but just to look at the times and study, the European train timetables, what time this would leave Nice, what time it would arrive in Berlin. And
although there is then a twist whereby the timetables suddenly come to be very important, but I won't. That's a spoiler. But there's also, and it's part of this fitting thing, there's this, as there was in Eggshells, an intense interest in language. I know you say that to a writer and it sounds so boring, but in your case it's so playful and joyful, but also quite troubled at both things at the same time. And one of the ways it comes out in this book is that the shadow of the German language is behind it. So all of the chapters open with a German compound word. Putzfimmel is one I liked, obsessed with cleaning. But there's lots of them. Heimweh, so home pain, so homesickness, and that there's something, I feel that the German language in Germany is playing an interesting role in this book in that way.
Yeah, like I loved I did Leaving Cert German, and I found German grammar really difficult, but I loved the nouns. I just loved that they piled up all these nouns together and they were so literal to make something different. So you could it was like a mathematical equation, this plus this equals this. So I've been obsessed with them for years, and like a lot of my obsessions, they eventually come out in a book. And I thought it worked well. I thought I was going to do them initially with Roy, because that seemed to be how his brain would work. But then I found a lot of ones, when I kept researching more and more compound nouns, that seemed to fit with Gert as well. So they got added onto her chapters too.
Because there's something about the whole setup. It's also very funny when you think of it, that there's a brother and sister who both did Leaving Cert German, who are both in Germany together, but neither of them is really able to speak German. But they kind of half know things. They know bits and bits.
But they know the wrong things, don't they? They know the literary stuff, but not the practical.
Yeah. And that seems to me like a kind of metaphor for a bigger problem, of language not quite fitting experience.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that's how I wanted it too. It increased the kind of the alienation. And Gert starts looking, at one point she's eating ice cream and she starts looking up the word for the strawberries in German, and then starts looking at a list of berries in German, and then is going, what am I doing? I can't say anything in German. I can't make basic conversation. I'm now studying berries. Like, what am I at? So I kind of wanted these people who just go into their head and then, but they should be more practical. That it's not the best way to live.
But I feel then, you're younger than me, but we are both in our 40s.
We're Generation X,
yes, we're Generation X. And I feel that for us, growing up in Ireland, coming of age in the 90s, Germany was a very important place in the background. Lots of people went to work there in the summers. A lot of us did German in school. It was kind of the big economic superpower, the kind of European dream, and my feeling is that's playing a role in this too. Maybe even in the title of the book, an idea, a place where the trains, the trams are on time, where things work.
Yeah, it kind of, for me, it was held up as his ideal, like where everything does operate on time, and then they feel more at odds with it because they're not perfect. But there is one moment where Gert realises when the train timetable says it'll come in 2 minutes, and then the 2 minutes is there 10 minutes later.
Yes.
So it's not as perfect as it looks.
Yeah, it's not as perfect as it looks. Yeah, it's not the Wunderland.
Yeah.
So the other part of language is that the Gert's sections especially are in this fantastic Irish vernacular style that, and nothing we have in common is that our parents are from Mayo.
Yeah.
That's both of us. And a lot of it reminds me of the way my parents speak.
Right.
Take that puss off you is one that just comes to
Yeah,
mind.
that could be Mayo.
But maybe I'd love to know a bit more about that, because it's so alive, the language. I mean, it just carries you along from the first sentence right through to the end.
See, I'm fascinated by this because I don't know. Like, that would be a voice in my head, and certainly from my parents. Like, yeah, they take the puss off you, or whatever these phrases. And I kind of increased her mamminess, in the novel. And I wrote it, like I said before, I had kids, but I find myself now with kids saying these kind of Mayo phrases come up from the depths. So, but I wouldn't know if they're specifically Mayo. Like, I know with some of the women I work with who are true blue dubs, and they come out in some of the same phrases. Right. So I couldn't tell you which. It's certainly very Irish, and I'd say some of the phrases could be just Dublin, some of them could be Mayo. Like, there could be that hybrid mix.
But there's a real joy in that Irish vernacular in the book, and it's one of them. As I was saying earlier, the book is a real. It's hard to describe until you read it, but a combination of grief and joy, and I think a lot of the joy comes in this playing with language, both English and German.
And I think Gert especially is using that to try and she's using language to try and make sense of what happened with her husband, and even trying to define his illness and the language used and what's helpful, what's unhelpful. So I think she's constantly playing with words. And she does get joy from it too. And I think when I was doing the edit of the book, I kind of asked, could I keep some of the, it's not grammatically correct. Say, I'm trying to think now, I can't think of a phrase, but some of it would be just as you'd speak. It's vernacular. I didn't want it to be corrected to be grammatical. I wanted it just to be this gush of thought, I think.
It is, and you feel it really carries the reader along with it, so that you're kind of, even though everybody is obviously broken in some way or damaged in the novel, as a kind of a work of art, the book makes, in a strange way, makes them whole again, because it makes their not fitting. I suppose it makes a feature out of it, if you like, but it makes it. I suppose your book creates a world in which they strangely can fit.
And then I suppose even though the brother and sister are antagonistic and kind of they have this tension, they still come together in a way because they are similar. Like, they can be complete opposites, or, Gert is more physically attuned to herself and Roy is much more reserved, but they still kind of come together, or they fit together in a certain way, and they have this unspoken language that a brother and sister do going back years, that even if they're slagging each other or insulting each other, there's a comfort there that I think she was more treading on eggshells at home, and kind of there's certain moments that are almost she's at ease with him.
And just as you say that, it really strikes me that, and this is something that you also did brilliantly in Eggshells, and here I think even more so, that you replicate that experience in the reader, that we go through this novel feeling very intimate with both of the characters right from the start, but also not sure how we fit, if there's really space for us. So all of those things you describe about the characters are things that happen to the reader's heart and mind and emotions as we go through the book. It's a very intense experience, but also strangely a very pleasurable one. I mean, anybody who starts this book is going to finish it very quickly.
That's brilliant to hear.
So the book is out now. It's in the shops.
Yep.
Right. It's really great. I thank you so much for writing it, first of all, and for talking to me about it. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for the chat, Barry. On Mayo. Sneaky one in there.
Bring the sound home. Bring sound home.
No, that was really good. Great, thanks, Barry.
Was it all right?
Yeah,